I've often thought there's these 7 things that people have to get approximately right. You know, we went through some of them. You need an intimate relationship, family, job or career. You have to take care of yourself mentally and physically, your health. You have to regulate your drug and alcohol use. You have to use your work time productively outside of work. There's one other I often mention, I can't remember now. It's an arbitrary list in some sense, but if you don't have a list, it's a good one. Mm-hmm. And maybe you could pick one of those things and work on them. And if you have all of those things, your life is likely to be better. You know, maybe you're a true radical and you have to live in a way that isn't traditional. And you don't need any of that. Highly improbable that that's true. And God only knows how you're going to find your own way. But until you know that for certain, it's not such a bad idea to adopt an apprenticeship in at least one of these areas. And you know, the purpose of being an apprentice isn't so that you're a slave. It's so that you become capable of your masterpiece, of transcending the discipline. So the idea is, look, there's lots of disciplinary strategies. There's lots of games you could play. And so you can fall into a moral relativism, say, well, all games are equal. It's like, well, no, but even if that's true, the fact that you need a game, that isn't relative. That's true. You need a game. Pick a game. Which game? Anyone is better than none. Play it hard. See what happens. You'll change as a consequence of the pursuit. And I think you have to be in very dire straits before that won't work. You can be in straits that are so dire that you can't move forward. But generally, you're somewhere that you could improve in some manner.
Is just getting people to believe that, is that harder than actually doing it in some ways? That we seem to be, there's so many young people that just feel so lost that just getting them, just convincing them to do it is in some ways more important than doing it.
Well, I don't think you can convince them exactly, but you can ask them. It's like, okay, well, think about your life. And I do think I addressed this directly in that chapter. Remember sometime you accomplished something difficult. Well, was that good or not? And generally, the human experience, as far as I can tell, is that when you've accomplished something difficult, you regard that as worthwhile. So, okay, so look, so then you say, and this is a therapeutic technique in some sense, because you don't try to convince people, you get them to look at their own experience. It's like, well, it turns out that in your life, when you've done something that stretched you beyond where you were, so that was difficult, that you regarded that as worthwhile. Okay, so let's assume that that's true and that can be duplicated.
Most people have problems in living. They don't have psychological problems. And so I've experienced, despite my love for the psychoanalysts, very frequently what I'm doing as a therapist is helping people have a life that would work. You know, and you can parameterize that. It's like, what do you need? How about some friends? That people kind of like that. How about an intimate relationship with someone that you can trust, that maybe has a future? That'd be good. How about a career that puts you in a dominance hierarchy somewhere, so at least you've got some possibility of rising, some possibility of stabilizing yourself, and a schedule and a routine, because no one can live without a routine. You just forget that. If you guys don't have a routine, I would recommend, like, you get one going, because you cannot be mentally healthy without a routine. You need to pick a time to get up. Whatever time you want, but pick one and stick to it, because otherwise you dysregulate your circadian rhythms and they regulate your mood. And eat something in the morning. I had lots of clients who've had anxiety disorders. I had one client who was literally starving. Very smart girl. There was very little that she liked. She kind of tried to subsist on like half a cup of rice a day. She came to me and said, I have no energy. I come home, all I want to do is watch the same movie over and over. What, like, is that weird? And I thought, well, it depends on how hard you work. You know, it's a little weird, but whatever. It's familiar. You're looking for comfort. So I did an analysis of her diet. It's like 3/4 of a cup of rice. It's like, you're starving. Eat something. You know, you'll feel better. So she modified her diet, and all her anxiety went away, and she had some energy. It's like, yeah, you got to eat. So a schedule, that's a good thing, man. Brain will thank you for it. It will stabilize your nervous system. With a bit of a plan, that's a good thing. You need a career, you need something productive to do with your time. You need to regulate your use of drugs and alcohol, most particularly alcohol, because that does in a lot of people. You need a family, like the family you have, your parents and all that. It'd be nice if you all got along, you could work on that. That's a good thing to work on. And then, you know, you probably need children at some point, and that's life. That's what life is. And if you're missing, you know, you may have a good reason to not be operating on one of those dimensions. It's not mandatory. But I can tell you that if you're not operating reasonably well on 4, I think I mentioned 6, if you're not operating reasonably well on at least 3 of them, there's no way you're going to be psychologically thriving. And that's more pragmatic in some sense than psychological, right? Human beings have a nature. There's things we need. And if we have them, well, that's good. And if we don't have them, well, then we feel the lack. And so behaviorists, behavioral psychologists concentrate a lot more on that sort of thing. You know, it's practical. Strategizing. Make a career plan. Figure out how to negotiate, because that's bloody important. Figure out how to say what you need. Figure out how to tell the truth to people. Figure out how to listen to your partner in particular, because if you listen to them, they will actually tell you what they want. And sometimes you can give it to them, and maybe they'll return the favor. And if you practice that for like 15 years, well, then maybe you're constantly giving each other what you want. Well, hooray. That would be good. And there's 2 of you under most circumstances, and it's better to have 2 brains than 1, because people think differently because of their temperament mostly. And so the negotiation is where the wisdom arises, and it's part of the transformation, the psychological transformation that's attendant on an intimate relationship, and one of the fundamental purposes of a long-term intimate relationship.
Try to make one room in your home as beautiful as possible. See something around you.
My favorite chapter.
Yeah. Well, you've got some interesting artistic taste.
Yeah, I suppose. That's a chapter about the value of beauty as a marker for the transcendent. And it's great. You want to establish a relationship with things that sustain you. Truth, the great verities, truth, beauty. Beauty is difficult to define, but it's an invitation to the transcendent, essentially. Because beauty speaks of the ideal, and it impacts you beyond thought. It's visceral beauty, and that's an indication of the power of the ideal. And if you try to establish a relationship with beauty, and so to do that, you can make one corner of your room beautiful. If you can, you start to play with the idea of beauty. You start to learn to discriminate between what's beautiful and what isn't. And then you invite that into your life. And that's a terrifying thing to some degree. Because beauty is very powerful, partly because it reminds you of who you aren't. But it's amazingly worthwhile. And it's sort of the next step beyond cleaning up your room. You know, make it orderly, but then the next step is make it beautiful.
So you're done being someone that you were, a school kid. You're done with that. And so that's an achievement, but it's also the end of something. It's the end of an identity, and it's a new beginning. So now you have a new beginning. You have a new beginning. You don't get that many of those in your life. If you move, if you switch jobs, if you make a radical life transformation, you may have that. Sometimes that's accidental. It's thrust upon you. That's different. That's harder. Sometimes it's because of opportunity, but maybe you get 4 or 5 opportunities like that in your life. So they're rare. You get to be someone new. Who? Have a vision. So when I started to puzzle this out, it was often because of talking to clients or students who didn't know what to do. What should I do with my life? I don't know what to do with my life. Fair enough. And that's not a very good question. What do I do with my life? It's like, what's the answer to everything? It's not a good question, right? It's too vague. So I suppose I answered this to some degree, at least initially, like a conservative person. I said, well, what other people do? Well, they have an intimate relationship. They have a family. So that could be your birth family, so you could fix that up. Or it could be, your new family, your kids, your wife. They have friends. They have a social community. That might involve civic responsibility, which is something we're direly lacking at the moment. You need a job. You need to take care of yourself mentally and physically. You need to educate yourself. You need to regulate your reaction to temptation. There's 8 things. Okay, so now you get to be whoever you want, but you have to want it, and you have to aim at it. And so to do that, you have to have a vision. Part of the utility of literature is the provision of such visions. Negative, in the case of anti-heroes, positive in the case of protagonists. Who could you be? Part of the advantage of being educated in the humanities is that you can draw your models from the best history has to offer. And that's really what an education in humanity should present you with. It's like, here are the great people of history, and that's you in potential. And so that means you can establish a new peer group. In some sense, my peer group has always been the people whose books I most admired. And that's a reach, right? Because who dares to compare himself, herself to the truly great people of the past? Nietzsche for me, Dostoevsky, Jung, and then the classic philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and Kant and Hume, all these stunning people that were brilliant beyond conception. That's a high reach and presumptuous in some sense, but the point of a humanities education is in large part to surround yourself with peers of the highest quality. And then you also want to do that with your peers. So one of the things you want to ask yourself if you're graduating from high school is, well, now I'm off to do something else. Might be a job, might be college, might be trade school. It's like, I'm going to make new friends. What's a friend? What do I want? I want someone to tell good news to, who will celebrate with me. I want someone to tell bad news to, who will be upset that something bad happened to me and not secretly happy. I want someone who's aiming up for me and for them. Or not. Or do you not want that? It's like, what do you want if you're taking care of yourself? What would you want in a relationship? Need a vision for this. And we do an staggeringly appalling job of helping young people even understand that that's necessary. And I know partly why. I was very curious about this because I spent a lot of time with this future authoring program, self-authoring, part of the self-authoring suite, because we built a program to help people make a plan. And once we built the program, one of the things we found, for example, was that if you gave it to young men who were entering college, the few months before they went to college, they were 50% less likely to drop out in the first year.
Yeah,
it's crazy. For a 90-minute exercise, it's like, that's just... If the world had any sense, every single college would have immediately used that upon publication of our paper. But none of them did. And that says something.
Is that mainly just goal setting? Like, what do you want?
Well,
envision that, and then...
I think goal setting's the wrong way to think about it. I think it's too narrow a conceptualization. I think that you need literally to imagine it. It's like you get to be who you want. Well, you need to run the story, like in detail. And if you're trying to predict whether someone's going to commit suicide, you ask them, well, have you ever thought about harming yourself? Well, sometimes. Have you ever thought about killing yourself? Well, the thoughts crossed my mind. Do you have a plan? Yeah, I have a plan. Well, can you tell me about the plan? Well, my dad has a 45 in the top shelf of his desk. I've seen it in there several times. the bullets are in the drawer next door, I thought, I could probably put that in my mouth in the bathroom so I didn't make too much of a mess, and probably do that in the morning.
That's
It's like,
great.
that's not good.
Yeah.
Right. That person's
That's
in
quite a
danger.
plan.
Yeah, because the dream has entered their mind. They've visualized it. And so it's not goal setting. It's much more like casting yourself in a fully fleshed out literary representation. It's like, what is your future? Who are you? And what you want to do is negotiate with yourself. It's like, just imagine, this is a gospel idea, right? That if you knock, the door will open. If you ask, you will receive. If you seek, you will find. And no one believes that. But I believe it's true.
Yeah, me
But
too.
it depends on what you mean by knock, ask, and seek. Because it means if you mean it.
Yeah, if your life depends on it.
Yeah, that's right.
basically.
That's right. You're all in on it. It's like, you want this? What do you mean
You don't
want?
kind of want.
No, that's
you don't
right.
want for like 2 minutes of the day and then you get bored.
Right, right. And your right
Aiming
hand
towards
wants it
it.
and your left hand
Yeah.
doesn't. And no, it doesn't mean that at all. It means you're going to make the sacrifices necessary and you're all in on it. Okay, so then the question becomes, well, what's worth going all in on? And the answer to that is, ask yourself. One of the things I tell young people all the time, I'm not a very typical psychologist in this regard, because psychologists like to pat people on the head and say, you're all right the way you are. I talked to Bishop Barron a while ago. I'm going to broadcast this, and he said that the Catholic priests were trained in the 1960s to kind of be accepting, humanistically. You're okay the way you are, And that's such rubbish. It's like, not only are you not okay the way you are, you don't think that anybody else is okay the way they are either. And you don't think your children are okay the way they are. Like, you love them and all that, but you don't want them to stay 3 years old their entire life. You want them to expand and improve and become who they are. And so, instead of telling young people that they're okay the way they are, I tell them that, and it's a terrible message for them if they're desperate. So let's say 10% of the people in my audience are young, maybe they're young men, just for the sake of argument, and they're like not in good shape. They don't have any goals. They're drinking too much. They're watching pornography all the time. They've got no aim. They've got no structure in their life, and they're just bloody miserable. And the misery is twisting them into malevolence, because enough misery will absolutely do that to you. And then what are you going to do? And come along and say, well, you're okay the way you are? It's like, that's the last thing they want to hear. It's like, get your damn act together. You got things to do, and they're going to be difficult. And that there's an echoing Christian message in there, I would say, which is, you pick up the weight of your suffering voluntarily, and you walk uphill with it. And that not only gives you the meaning that you need in your life to stop you from degenerating in a dangerous manner, but it actually makes things better. And so that all has to be part of it. Like, I believe in human ingenuity. I think we can solve all the problems that beset us. But it can't just be, it has to be more than we can enhance material well-being, which is what it tends to be now. It's not enough.
You might say, well, what might you replace an ideology with? And I would say, well, a differentiated view of and strategy for life. And so when I work with my clients, I never start with high order problems to begin with, like, how do I orient myself spiritually? So let's just leave that aside for a second. Okay, we'll return to it. So what do you need to get straight in your life? Well, you need a job or a career. Career, preferably, perhaps. The advantage to a job is that you do it for 8 hours, let's say, and you're done, right? With a career, you're in it all the time. Now, you'll make more money, you'll advance up the economic hierarchy, but you're never done with work if you have a career. And maybe that's what you want. But in any case, you have to have a job or a career. Why? Well, you don't want to starve. You want to take care of yourself and the people that are dependent on you. There are practical, obvious practical reasons, but there are psychological reasons too. I mean, a job gives you something to do every day, just as your career does. And it also addresses the deep human need to be of value and service to other people. And so that needs to be attended to. So if you're a young person, it's like, okay, have a plan. You need a job and a career. It would be good if it was something that you could be competent at. So the smarter you are, pure IQ, the more complex job you can manage. And then if you add the development of discipline to that, so that's the development of conscientiousness, that can further you. So you need conscientiousness and intelligence to be competent. And the more hardworking you are and the more intelligent, the more complex the job you can manage. So if you're of average intelligence, which you've probably figured out by the time you're 18 or so, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to be a high-end corporate lawyer unless you work insanely hard. So your better bet is to pick a profession that isn't so cognitively demanding, that's still useful. And trades are great as far as I'm concerned. It's not like tradespeople aren't skilled, and it's not like trades don't require intelligence. I'm not saying that. But it doesn't require as much abstraction, generally speaking. Like if you want to be a lawyer, you have to be hyper-literate and like 90th percentile literate, fundamentally. And you have to be able to formulate verbal arguments, or you're going to get crushed by someone who can do it. Okay, so job and career, you need a plan. Okay. Education. You should be as educated as you are intelligent. You should have a plan for that.
Yeah.
Okay. And it should continue because things change quick and you better keep up. Okay. So you should have a vision of that. People don't seem to do well without an intimate relationship. It'd be good if you could have a family and bring peace to the family that you have, because family is important, extraordinarily important. Those connections, so intimate relationship and family, whether that's your parents, your siblings, or the family that you start. You need a plan for that and a vision of that. You have to take care of your physical and mental health. You have to regulate your drug and alcohol intake. You have to figure out how to make productive and meaningful use of the time that's allotted to you outside of your obligations. That's extraordinarily useful. And you have to address your philosophical or spiritual / aesthetic yearnings, such as they might be. Well, so that's better than an ideology, a plan.
Sure. Right.
Now, and as you climb up your career, as you expand your competence and power, well, then you can get involved in larger scale transformations if that's where your interest takes you. And so with job and career, you should be competent and interested in it. That's a good pathway to success. I had already concluded intellectually that there was nothing good about nihilism and bitterness and resentment, that it was unbelievably dangerous, and that it isn't justified under any circumstances. And then I entered these extreme circumstances and I thought, well, this justifies it. It's like, I can't see how anybody could be in this situation and not shake their fist at God and in outrage. But I really, really thought it through and talked to my wife about it. And all I could conclude was that was wrong, is that it didn't justify it. There was nothing good in it. There was nothing helpful in it. All it was doing was hurting me. It was interfering with whatever good I still might be able to do in the world. The last chapter of my new book is Be Grateful in Spite of Your Suffering. And that was a chapter I, worked on and was doubtful about and returned to, and was like thoroughly irate about and felt hypocritical about, and so on and so forth, full gamut of emotional responses. But it's the right thing to do, to be grateful. It's and I'm not claiming this for myself. Mm-hmm. It's tightly allied with a kind of existential courage. It's a decision. And undoubtedly there are people who've been pushed farther in the domain of pain than me. Burn victims, people, suffer unimaginable agony. And I would never dare to compare my pain to someone else's extraordinary pain. It was certainly far worse than every day that I spent in the last 2 years was worse than any day I had before that by a huge margin. So for me, it was, well, like I said, if it had got any more extreme, I can't imagine that I would have lived through it. So the first conclusion was you still, under those conditions, you orient yourself upward and you try to do good in the world, and you don't. If you fall prey to resentment and anger and hostility, however justified, not even however rationalized, but however justified, even if an objective observer would say, well, no wonder you feel that way, it's not helpful.
So there was no good in it. That's what you said.
I see no good in it.
But then I wonder, like I would agree with you. I'm inclined to agree with that there's no good in that. But through there's the old cliched adage about going through hard times, revealing certain silver linings and certain benefits that you may not see in the moment. So are you open to that possibility of in the future some realization?
Well, there has been, I guess that this thing we already discussed, I would say, is of benefit. Whether that benefit justifies what I went through, I would say. So would I repeat what I went through, and still going through for that matter? I mean, I've only been feeling somewhat better for 5-6 days. I wouldn't repeat it to learn that. And
well,
I think
maybe you're still learning something. Maybe there's still something that's to come, some realization. I mean, I'm not saying that's the case.
I know you're not. Yeah. Well, God only knows, right? I mean, it wasn't until this last week that I really thought that through and realized that however extreme my pain, which was diffuse, it didn't justify resentment, it didn't justify ingratitude. It certainly didn't make those things work. But then the other thing that I did realize was, and people have commented on that being a difference between this book and the first book. The second book is more communitarian. There's less humor in it because I just wasn't up to humor, But there's more emphasis on cooperation and the social role in ethical behavior. And I think that's partly a consequence of me observing how far above the call of duty my friends and my family went while they were caring for me. And not only my friends and my family, but medical personnel and the general public who've been the general public, my viewers, readers, and listeners, let's say, have been unbelievably loyal and supportive. And so I've seen this outpouring of love from, at the micro level within my family and from my friends and from people I don't know, but who I communicate with. That saved my life for sure. There's no doubt about that. Multiple times, many, many times. The reason I emphasize individual responsibility, there's two reasons. One is, well, you can start right now, right where you are, no matter what you're doing. So you have that at hand. Second, if you become more responsible, you probably won't hurt anyone by doing it, right? It removes the convenience of the enemy. And that's given how terrible it is for us to generate, say, class-based explanations of enmity or racial-based explanations of enmity. That's something we really have to step carefully around. I mean, the worst crimes the human race has ever committed have been generated by class-based hypotheses of malevolence, class or ethnicity-based hypotheses of malevolence. It's terrible. And we need to avoid that. And I don't see that adopting more individual responsibility, even though it's not a cure-all, it doesn't, that's one danger it doesn't pose, in my estimation.